And hello everyone and welcome to the Movie Pit Podcast. I am your host, Christian. Thank you very much for joining me on the show today. It is, podcast, keep saying show. We're just gonna go with it. Hello, welcome back. I didn't do a podcast last week, sorry for that. But that was just because I wasn't feeling well. I got sick again, because that's apparently something I do now. So yeah, we didn't do a podcast like last week, which is kind of a shame because we had a pretty good podcast. We had a very good lineup of news and some big trailers dropped. So I'm just going to quickly run down everything that we would have talked about last week. I'm only going to stop and talk about just a few. But yeah, just hearing the lineup of what the podcast news was, I'm bummed that I got sick and we didn't get to talk about it. But so yeah, let's run down the news items from last week's show. So a lot of trailers dropped last week, which again I'm disappointed we had to talk about. A new international trailer for Resident Evil: The Final Chapter came out, which I would have never thought I would have been okay talking about another Resident Evil trailer coming out. But this international trailer that came out, and by the way, all the trailers that came out last week will be linked down below as well, right after the trailers that came out this week. So the international trailer was actually really good. It actually got me kind of pumped for it, which is very hard to think about considering the last one wasn't that good. The first trailer for Gore Verbinski's A Cure for Wellness came out. That's kind of a very kind of thriller. Almost, it has some horror elements in the trailer-esque to it, but I think it's gonna be more of a thriller. That looked great, to be honest with you. Gore Verbinski is a really great director, and after watching this trailer, I can't think of anything else but just let him do BioShock already. He wants to do an adaptation about. He's been wanting to do an adaptation for BioShock for years, and no one gave him the budget. And I think once we kind of see A Cure for Wellness, I think people will finally give it to him, because that trailer was really, really creepy. A new trailer for Assassin's Creed came out, and it looked awesome. People are still complaining about the song choices, but footage-wise, it looks great, to be honest. I can't wait to see it in December, and obviously we'll talk about it more once it comes out. Also, the first teaser for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 came out, and it brought us back into that world, and it was really, really good. It was a sneak peek. It was a teaser. James Gunn has said that the new trailer will come out soon, but he wanted to release something to kind of ease the fans a little bit, and eased us it did, but also teased us and wanting us for more. So there's rumors that a new trailer will be attached to Doctor Strange, but obviously we'll get to that next week when Doctor Strange comes out. And the final trailer that came out last week was Logan, and it was so good. It was really, really good. It was a trailer that just kind of blew everyone away. It was really good. So if you get a chance, go watch it. There's a domestic trailer and I believe it's a UK trailer, and the UK trailer shows one little tidbit that's not in the domestic trailer. That's it screams out Wolverine movie. It screams out rated R. And it's got a lot of people excited. So there's that. And also the Reavers will appear in Logan. That was rumored for a while now, and it appears that it will be. It is confirmed from the trailer and from the Instagram account for the Logan film that the Reavers will be in the film. All right, so let's get to the news items. Again, very quickly, I'm just going to run these down. Some of these I will stop at. Joe Manganiello says the Batman, the one that will be led and directed and co-written by Ben Affleck, will shoot in the spring. However, Jeremy Irons came out this week and said it might be shooting in the summer, so maybe it's kind of one of those late spring, early summer start dates. Godzilla 2 gets new writers in Zach Shields and Michael Doug Hardy. Both of them did Krampus. They wrote Krampus, and Doug Hardy directed. Doug Hardy also directed, I think I'm saying his last name wrong, but doesn't matter. It does matter, but I've heard his last name, and for some reason that's pronunciation that came to my head. Anyway, he directed Trick or Treat, which is a horror film anthology, which seems very timely since we are, of course, around Halloween, and he directed Trick or Treat, which I highly recommend you guys watch. If you're gonna sit down, do a movie marathon, Trick or Treat is definitely one of those movies you should definitely watch, because it is based on Halloween. It takes place during Halloween, so I highly recommend that film. But a report came out later that Doug Hardy would also be directing or potentially directing Godzilla 2, which says something a lot, because of course Gareth Edwards will not be returning. He will be producing the film, I believe, but now it looks like they're finding a new director, and Godzilla 2 I think starts filming I think like late next year or something like that. So we'll obviously keep you guys up. I'll obviously keep you guys updated on that once the news comes out. Captain Planet movie is finally in the works, and of all the people producing this film, Leonardo DiCaprio is producing a Captain Planet movie with his production company. There's no word yet. There was word that the film would take place years after the show, and that Captain Planet is kind of like this washed up hero, and he needs the help of the kids, well, because they're grown-ups now, of the people that he helped back in the day. So that was kind of like the left field news item last week. So there was that. Speaking about left field, this also was very left field as well. So what I just said was a lie. Warner Bros. Is developing a Willy Wonka reboot/prequel film.
Why would they do this?
It's not a sequel. It's a prequel. It's supposedly will take the character of Willy Wonka and talk about his adventures, I guess, before opening the chocolate factory, or how he led up to it. They didn't really go into specifics, but it was described as a prequel kind of origin adventure film for Willy Wonka, and no one really liked it. So we'll see what happens with that. Donald Glover does join the Young Han Solo spin-off film. He will play a young Lando Calrissian. Everyone was excited about that. Joss Whedon is developing a World War II horror film, or horror-esque film, as some reports are putting it. So there's that. There was a lot of Deadpool 2 news in this podcast and this week. So the first Deadpool 2 news is a shortlist for Domino came out. Now Domino is obviously a character from the comic books. She is essentially kind of like this. She's not essentially. She is a mercenary, but she has these telekinetic powers that kind of help her out with everything. And she does have a connection to Deadpool very much, and she also has a connection to Cable, which will appear in Deadpool 2. And we'll get more into some Deadpool news. But the shortlist for Domino came out, and here are the people that are currently on the short list and that have either tested or will be tested for the role, or have already been tested for the role since it came out last week. Lizzie Kaplan from the show Masters of Sex. She's also done a lot of comedy. She was just in oh my god, what was she just in? I just saw her in something. Maybe it was something old. But she's been in stuff. I'm pretty sure many people know who Lizzie Kaplan is. Mary Elizabeth Winston, who was just in 10 Cloverfield Lane. She also has her CBS show, Brain Dead. Sienna Miller, she was an American Sniper. She was also in Resident Evil films. Sophia Bontella, she's just recently in Star Trek Beyond. So Stephanie Sigmund, she's on the Netflix show Narcos. Sylvia Hoeks, she was in a show overseas called Overspell. She's going to be in Blade Runner, the Blade Runner sequel that's, I believe, currently filming or has just started filming somewhere as well. Again, that was the first shortlist. Then they released another shortlist of actresses. Kelly Rohrbach is in there. She's going to be in the Baywatch film. She's a supermodel turned actor. Eve Hewson, she was on the Star series The Nick. Ruby Rose, which is kind of making her way up the ladder of acting. She was in Orange is the New Black. She's going to be in John Wick Chapter 2. And the last one was Mackenzie Davis from The Martian and the AMC show Halt and Catch Fire. Now they note that the shortlist could have other names, but these are the ones that, again, have either already tested for the role or will be tested or have already been tested. That sounds weird saying that, but yeah, this is a short list. So again, it's a pretty decent short list. I mean, I'm not familiar with everyone on the list. I mean, Lizzie Kaplan is one that I'm very familiar with. Mary Elizabeth Winston is one. Sienna Miller is one. Sophia Bontella is one. Mackenzie Davis is one. Now, Mackenzie Davis, when the news came out that that Domino was going to be in Deadpool 2, Mackenzie Davis's name was attached to that report. So It seems like they're really aiming for her to be it, and I wouldn't mind that. I think she's a great actress and things she's done so far. And I haven't seen *Halt and Catch Fire*, but I hear nothing but great things, and I hear she's great on the show. So hopefully, if she was always the pick, hopefully she gets it. Some of these other people, Stephanie Sigmund, I'm not familiar with. Sylvia Hoeks, I'm not familiar with. Kelly Rowak is another one I'm not familiar with. Again, she's a model turned actress. Going to be in Baywatch. Apparently, she's done some small stuff in other movies before, just nothing I know. And Heave Houston, she was on The Nick. I've always been wanting to watch The Nick. I just haven't watched it. She played one of Tom Hanks' daughters in Bridge of Spies. But yeah, this is a pretty good list. Sophia Bontella is another one. I mean, she was in Kingsman, she was in Star Trek, so we know she can handle herself in the action realm. Mary Elizabeth Winstead is just a great actress all around. So we'll see what happens with this. And but again, Mackenzie Davis's name was always kind of attached, especially to the report that said that Domino would be appearing. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. So the big Deadpool news item that came out last week that has bled over to this week is that Tim Miller has dropped out of directing Deadpool 2.
Son of a bitch.
So Tim Miller was, of course, someone with Ryan Reynolds, who of course stars in the film, and he's also a producer on the film, along with the writers Rent Reese and Paul Wernick. They were the core. They were the people that always believed Deadpool can be on the big screen, and they just wanted to see it on the big screen. They finally got their wish and they did it, and it was a highly successful film. So Tim Miller dropped out, and some reports say that he wasn't officially signed on to direct, but he was there, and it kind of was the assumption was made that he would be directing. But again, these are some reports, and there's a lot of conflicting reports surrounding Deadpool. So here was the thing. So it's very complicated, so try to stick with me. And again, this is stuff that came out last week and that's bleeding over into this week. So Miller dropped out of directing, and the reports say that it was an amicable leave, that he left on good terms with everyone, but of course doesn't take away some of the disappointment that a lot of people had. Now, one of the reasons supposedly was that there was creative differences. Now, the first report said that it was just creative differences, that was it. Nothing, no one said anything. It was like, oh, okay, well, whatever. But then, this week, news came out, and this would have been something that I would have ended the podcast with, but again, don't want to leave you guys hanging on the Deadpool news. So, news came out that creative differences were about, supposedly, and again, there's conflicting reports on this, money. Now, according to The Wrap, who were first reported on this, Ryan Reynolds and the writers, Rhett Reese and Paul Rennick, wanted Deadpool 2 as a, quote, scrappy, raunchy, and inexpensive movie. So they pretty much wanted it like the first film. And they wanted to keep the tone and the spirit of the first film and not increase the budget too much. As the first one, I think, was like made for like $58 million. I think that I read that somewhere, which is very cheap considering it's a superhero movie by a big name studio, by the way. Miller, again, some reports say that Miller, on the other hand, wanted a more, quote, stylish take in the vein of more traditional superhero movies, which would have, again, Deadpool being made for cheap, would have tripled the budget of Deadpool 2. Now, the report mentions that it gets a bit blurry because 20th Century Fox may or may not have been involved in the managing of the relationship between Reynolds and Miller, and apparently this stuff was going on even before Deadpool even came out. Their kind of strained relationship. And this kind of contradicts a little bit of what Miller said at Silicon Valley Comic-Con, where he said the potential sequel didn't need to be bigger. This is kind of where everyone's like, oh, well, he said this, but then there's reports saying this, and there's other reports saying that's not true, because there are some people on news outlets who have talked to Miller and said that that's not the case. He didn't want a bigger budget. So that kind of remains a question mark, that money issue. And the money issue, again, if a studio sees a movie that they probably have a lot of faith in, or they took a risk on, and the risk pays off and the movie becomes very successful, they are going to give that potential sequel more money. And that's always the case, really. But if we're going with the report from The Wrap saying that Miller wanted a more stylish take in the vein of other superhero films, it's hard to be like, well, yeah, I mean, that doesn't sound too bad. But then you hear it's going to triple the budget, then yeah, it gets a little ridiculous. But at the same time, Miller is one of those guys who has worked in the visual effects department for years. And that's where you got to start. That's essentially what he does for a living until he directed Deadpool, which was his first feature-length film. And apparently his studio, his special effects studio, did the special effects for Deadpool. Again, conflicting reports for free. They were like, oh, we'll handle the special effects. Don't worry about it. So, I mean, there's so many conflicting reports that it gets kind of hard to kind of see where things are coming from. Some people very close to Miller say that's the whole money thing is not the case. That's total bull. So, we'll never find out what the real issue is unless, someone decides to speak out. Moreover, the rap reports that Miller and Reynolds disagreed on who should play Cable. Now, Cable was always involved. I mean, there was the post-credit scene in Deadpool 1, said that in Deadpool 2, we would see Cable. Now, there were reports mentioning what the Domino report, the news report came out with the short list. I mentioned there was an early report that said Domino was going to appear in Deadpool 2. That same report had Miller's choice for Deadpool in Kyle Chandler from Friday Night Lights. And that was always kind of Miller's top pick, Kyle Chandler. But apparently Reynolds wanted someone who looked closer to the character from the comics, although no names were officially given on who he kind of wanted. I mean, he joked around saying Keira Knightley in the post-credit scene. He mentioned someone else, I can't remember who it was. I think Dolph Lundgren, was that the name? I don't remember. But he mentioned a few names, kind of, rattling off some names. Of course, as Deadpool, so we don't know. So that was apparently another reason why Miller left. The split wasn't nasty. It wasn't like, oh, screw you, I'm gonna go make my own movie somewhere else. No, it was a very level-headed split. And 20th Century Fox, they even gave Miller another project to work on. They gave him a adaptation for some sci-fi novel adaptation called I didn't write it down. But yeah, they gave him another project. So it wasn't like, we hate Miller now. No, they gave him another project. So he's working on something that Fox has been trying to get off the ground for a few years now. So the split was level-headed, but it still doesn't lessen the blow, really. So yeah, we have all this Deadpool news. We don't know who to trust and all that, and it gets kind of murky. Let's just put it that way. It's a little murky at the moment. Should they have put out that Miller wanted more money? Maybe Miller did want more money, but maybe not. Maybe they over-exaggerated on how much money he really wanted. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with Deadpool. And so I left with no director. Main point I wanted to make was they were left with no director. And Ryan Reynolds came out, and he kind of, he in a very, not a joking way, but, he was like, he was being him. And he said that personally, if he wanted someone to direct, his kind of dream choice would be Quentin Tarantino. And a lot of people got behind that, and they even started making petitions for Quentin Tarantino to direct Deadpool 2. Which, if you've been listening to this podcast long enough, you know that I'm not the biggest Quentin Tarantino fan as a person. For his films are different. His films are rather good. But as a person, sometimes Quentin Tarantino has a way of kind of just making me dislike him. But his films are great. And some of the stuff that Quentin Tarantino says, filmmaking-wise, makes sense. And again, it's just sometimes the way he kind of acts, it just rubs me the wrong way. But even I agreed, and I love Quentin Tarantino as a director. The films he makes are great. But the idea of him directing Deadpool 2, for me personally, it I don't know, it doesn't really fit. I mean, violence wise it fits, but I don't know, if you tell me, hey, what do you think of Quentin Tarantino directing a Deadpool movie, I'd be like, no, not really. I don't think so. It's just, again, nothing against Quentin Tarantino as a director, because again, I love his films, but I don't know, it doesn't feel, I mean, I wouldn't complain, I'd still go watch it, but it just doesn't feel right for me. So going to Deadpool, again, I was going to save this for later on the podcast, but I might as well talk about it now. Deadpool 2 is eyeing some directors. So a report came out, and they have 3 names at the moment. One of them is Magnus Martins. He's directed the Netflix series Luke Cage, which is getting a lot of rave reviews at the moment. The other name is David Leitchi. I think that's how you say his name. He co-directed John Wick, the first one. And the last name is Drew Goddard, who, of course, directed The Cabin in the Woods. So those are the 3 names attached right now. And Leitchi is apparently the top choice over at Fox. And he's not that bad of a choice. It's a very interesting choice. He's done a lot of work ranging as a second-year director for films like The Wolverine and even Captain America: Civil War. He even did some stunt choreography for Captain America: Civil War, and he did some stunt choreography for V for Vendetta and Tron Legacy. This man has been attached to a lot of these, action-heavy films, so he knows how to handle himself and he knows how to direct them. So it seems like a very interesting choice. If they go with him, I think it'd be pretty cool. I mean, he's not a big name director, obviously. I think a lot. If you just say who directed John Wick, you'd be like, I don't know, unless you just heard this podcast said David Leitchi. So we'll see what happens with that. He's an interesting choice. I wouldn't complain too much about that. Although now that I see Drew Goddard's name attached to it, I kind of want him to direct because I'm a huge Drew Goddard fan. But we'll see what happens with Deadpool. They're currently aiming to start filming next year, sometime early next year. I believe it does have a release date, but I think they said they're gonna move it. I could be wrong. Maybe I read that wrong. But it currently has a release date for, I believe, January, which doesn't make any sense. Which I think is why I made it up in my head that they would move that. Well, we'll see what happens. So obviously, if any news comes out Deadpool wise, I will let you guys know. All right, so I'm bleeding. I already bled over to this week's news items. So let's just get right back to it. The next news item is that Pixar has moved the release date for Incredibles 2 to June 15th, 2018. So we will be seeing finally the sequel to The Incredibles not next year, 2 years from now. So it's still a pretty long wait. And they've also moved Toy Story 4 to June 21st, 2019. Which I mean is a good, I guess it's a good idea. I mean, obviously people probably want an Incredibles 2 more than they want a Toy Story 4. So moving the release dates is not that bad of a move on Pixar's part. So let's move on to the next news item. Uwe Boll has finally retired.
Yes! Yes! Yes!
Alright, so let's back it up a little bit. Uwe Boll, for those guys who don't know, is a German-born director who has been called by people online one of the worst directors in Hollywood. His movies aren't met with a lot of fanfare from fans or critics or anyone. And some even say that his movies are just getting worse and worse and worse. Needless to say, Boll is not a fan favorite. Right? Let's put it that way. So when he told Metro that he was retiring, a lot of people came out and again rejoiced. Boll has made a lot of bombs at the box office, let's put it that way, and he's kind of stuck a lot with video game adaptations. I'm gonna run down the video game movies he's directed: Far Cry, Postal, all the Dungeon Siege Tale movies. There was 3 in total. Blood Rain, 3 movies in total. He directed all of those. Alone in the Dark, and the one that kind of got him on the map was House of the Dead. House of the Dead, not very good, terrible. Alone in the Dark, I don't even remember watching Alone in the Dark. I know I watched it. I don't remember anything about that. I really wanted to watch Blood Rain because I was a huge fan of the games, and then I heard how much. And Christina, I already forgot her first. Loken, she was the android in the third Terminator film. I knew she was in it, and I was younger then. And I had a thing for her, and I knew she was in it, and I never got a chance to go watch it, and I heard it sucked, and I watched like 10 minutes of it on TV one day, and I was like, yep, turning it off. Watch something else. And the Dungeon Scene movies, I never seen any of them. Far Cry I wanted to watch because again I was a fan of the games, and I didn't realize that Uwe Boll was directing the film. Then I saw he was directing, and I was like, no, not gonna do that. He's directed other films as well, but he's again the bulk of. It felt like a lot of the bulk of his work was video game adaptations, and not all of them and none of them apparently. I mean, he has his defenders, there are people that like his films. But a lot of them were not met with a lot of fanfare. Just put it that way. So here's what he told Metro and why he was retiring and what kind of led to it. Here's what he said. So the market is dead. You don't make money anymore on movies because the DVD and Blu-ray market worldwide has dropped 80% in the last 3 years. That is the real reason. I just can't afford to make movies. I can't go back to student filmmaking because I have made so many movies in my life, and I can't make cheaper and cheaper movies at my age. It's a shame. I would be happy to make movies, but it is not financially profitable. So, and part of his comments are true. Well, not part of his comments. His comment is kind of true. The DVD and Blu-ray market has dropped. I don't know if it's 80%. I didn't check that. But it has dropped because, obviously we have streaming services now. We have Netflix, we have Amazon, and we have iTunes. And a lot of these streaming services, people will just be like, well, I'm just going to buy it online. I can always have it there. Or I can just go on Netflix and just pay for my subscription. It will always be there if I want to watch it. Not a lot of people are buying Blu-rays and DVDs nowadays. I mean, there's still people out there that buy Blu-rays and DVDs. But it's not as many as it was before the streaming service craze kind of took on. Another reason why he's probably not making a lot of money, probably doesn't have the budget that he used to have, is because his movies suck. But that's another discussion. Boll went on to say he hopes his retirement will make critics go back and watch his films with fresh eyes. I don't know if that will happen, but that's something he brought up. And of course, he couldn't stop himself from taking a stab at Hollywood just one last time, saying his 2013 film Assault on Wall Street was better than Oliver Stone's Wall Street 2, saying it's way better than Wall Street 2 by Oliver Stone. It's better researched, it's better written, it's better. And it doesn't have Michael Douglas. It's not Jason Bourne or any other bullshit movie where they made stuff up. My movies are real. Yes, your movies are real, Uwe Boll. All your video game adaptations are real. I never saw Assault on Wall Street. I don't know anything about that. I mean, I'll agree that Oliver Stone's Wolf of Wall Street 2 was not as good, but I'm not gonna go out of the way and say it was better than, or say it was worse than Assault on Wall Street, which I've never seen, so I don't know. And Uwe Boll is always taking stabs at how, I mean, he went after Captain America for some odd reason, saying that it wasn't real, and it's kind of the reason why filmmaking is going I don't know, it didn't make any sense. So anyway, besides all that, and besides how easy it is to make fun of Uwe Boll for being the worst director in Hollywood, I did enjoy one of his movies. I enjoyed his a movie called Rampage, which went on to make 2 sequels. And actually, his last film, Uwe Boll's last film, when it comes out, will be Rampage: President Down, which I think is set to come out. I don't know. It's sometime this year, I believe. Or in January. I don't remember. It's coming out soon, but that's gonna be his last film. I only saw the first Rampage, and I rather enjoyed it, even if I knew it was directed by him, but I rather enjoyed it, and it wasn't as bad as I thought it was gonna be. But I haven't watched the sequels, and I kind of don't want to. But I saw the first one for whatever reason, and it wasn't that bad. So I don't think anyone's gonna be missing Boll. Again, I know there are people out there that are defenders of his, that are fans of his, but mostly, especially considering all the response so far online, he probably won't be missed. And despite me never being a fan of his, it is a shame to see a director say these comments, saying that, you can't make a profitable movie anymore, and I can't make movies that I want, or movies that I really want to make at my age because of the financial drop a little bit, profitable drop. And again, it's true to an extent. I mean, movies are a lot harder to make nowadays because everyone wants franchises and tentpoles and whatever. And Hollywood's giving you that, and Hollywood's giving you sequels you don't probably want. But at the same time, you can skulk and say all that stuff, but it doesn't change the fact that you made shitty movies that no one wants to watch. So, yeah. So, will I miss Uwe Boll? Not really. No, I won't miss Uwe Boll. But his comments about the market dropping and not making any profits is true. So I will give him that. Let's move on from that. Sherlock Holmes 3 is getting a writer's room to work out the script. Now, writer's rooms, maybe you've heard me talk about writer's rooms here on the podcast in the past. They are slowly kind of becoming the norm these days in Hollywood, as studios want to bring in writers to work out script ideas or work out story ideas for potential script to the movie they're going to make. Universal has one right now for their shared Monsters universe. Transformers, Paramount has one for the Transformers franchise. James Cameron built a writer's room for the Avatar films that he's going to do. So now it looks like Warner Brothers is putting together one for their third Sherlock Holmes film. So the writers they bought in, Warner Brothers and Robert Downey Jr.'s production team, because he is a producer on the film, have set up a pretty good writers' room. It's not that bad. They have Kieran Fitzgerald, who wrote Snowden. They have Justin Malin, who wrote Baywatch. He's also written some other films. I didn't write them down because I'm an idiot. Gary Whitta, who wrote Rogue One, a Star Wars story, and Nicole Perlman, who wrote or co-wrote Guardians of the Galaxy, and she's writing Captain Marvel at the moment as well. So that's the writers' room they got going on right now. They're working out the script, and we'll see what happens there. Guy Ritchie is expected to return and direct the film, but other than that, we don't know anything about the film. Of course, other than Robert Downey Jr. will return to play Sherlock Holmes, and pretty much, assumingly, Jude Law will come back to play Watson. Disney is developing a modern-day Oliver Twist movie with Ice Cube, because why not? Disney is developing a modern-day twist of the beloved and well-known Charles Dickens classic, Oliver Twist. The film will be a musical take on the story, and is not only being developed by Disney and Ice Cube, who will also produce the film and star in the film as Fagin, the master crook who recruits Oliver into his gang of pickpocketers. It is being also produced by the director of Hamilton, Tommy Kail. Now, I know when you think of Hamilton, you think of Lin-Manuel Miranda, but Tommy Kail was the man behind it. He actually directed the play. Now, The Hollywood Reporter reports that the project is, quote, crossing many genres, including hip-hop, which is where Ice Cube probably comes in. So, there's that. The story's been told multiple times. I mean, you guys know there's a lot of movies and TV shows and stage plays out there. But this one will hopefully set it apart from its other adaptations that we've seen. Mark Platt is producing the film. He's been attached to musical adaptations in the past, like Into the Woods, and he's attached to upcoming musical, not all-out musical films, but films that will have musical pieces in them. La La Land and Mary Poppins Returns. So we'll see what happens with that. No word yet on when Disney is thinking about taking this into production, but now they got some producers behind them. We'll see what happens with that. And speaking with Disney, Disney has found a new Santa Claus in Kevin Hart. What? Kevin Hart is a very busy man, and apparently he will get very more busier because he's in negotiations. He's in negotiations to join the family-friendly Christmas comedy Dashing Through the Snow. The film is based on an original idea by Scott Rosenberg and follows a New York City detective who is a workaholic and has a strained relationship with his son. The only thing that may be able to repair the father-son relationship is the one and true Santa Claus, who has to make the man believe in Christmas magic. Hart is actually set to play Santa Claus, which is very interesting. It's a very interesting choice, and probably not the first. I mean, you think of Kevin Hart, you're like, nah, he's probably playing the cop, right? Nope, he's playing Santa, because why not, right? We can have Black Santa. We've had Black Santas in the past. James Earl Jones, although he wasn't actually Santa, he voiced Santa in a Recess animated special, because everyone loves Recess, and I loved Recess, and I still remember that Recess thing. Tracy Morgan played Santa Claus in The Night Before. I know there was someone else. I can't think. For some reason, Eddie Murphy is the only one that's coming to my mind. Eddie Murphy played Santa Claus in an SNL skit. I remember that. There was someone else. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure I could have swore I wrote it down, but I guess I didn't. Anyway, the script is aiming for the tone in the vein of Liar, Liar, and Elf, which, if that's the case, I don't know. I honestly don't know what to think about this news item. Sometimes news items break me, and this is one of them. There's no director yet, but the search is on for it. What do you think of Kevin Hart playing Santa Claus? That seems interesting. Let's move on. Going back a little bit, speaking about sequels that no one wanted, London Has Fallen gets a sequel in Angel Has Fallen. Yes, there's going to be another As Fallen film. Reports say that Gerard Butler will return as Secret Service agent Mike Banning to protect the President of the United States, presumably played once again by Aaron Eckhart from Foreign Threats. The film this time around will be called Angel Has Fallen, which is a code name for Air Force One. And I just lied to you because it's always assumed that Mike Banning is protecting the president, which is not true this time around, because Angel Has Fallen will have Mike Banning being the target this time around. But of course, the president's there, so maybe there's he's probably going to be in threat. I mean, right? I mean, that's what happens in these movies. The first film was, of course, called Olympus Has Fallen and was directed by Anton Fuqua and was a surprise hit by many. So, of course, the studio was like, let's make a sequel. And they made London Has Fallen, which was not very good. Or not as good as Olympus Has Fallen. It has moments, but it wasn't as good. So we'll see what happens with that. Angel Has Fallen will be targeting to start filming sometime next year in the spring. And right now, Gerard Butler is the only one attached. There's no director yet, but I'm sure if they're going to start filming in the spring, they're probably already started developing that and have some people that they haven't announced just yet. Scarlett Johansson is developing her own Zelda Fitzgerald biopic. Now, last week, there was a news item. I didn't mention it at the top of the podcast, but last week there was announced that Jennifer Lawrence and Ron Howard will be teaming up to produce and potentially direct and star in a Zelda Fitzgerald biopic film called Zelda. Now, this week, Scarlett Johansson was like, you're not going to be the only one in town, because apparently we have to have dueling competitive films about the same thing in Hollywood nowadays. Scarlett Johansson is developing her own biopic on the jazz age icon and wife of course, famed author F. Scott Fitzgerald. The film will be called The Beautiful and the Damned, after the novel written by her husband. That was a semi-fictionalized account of the marriage with Zelda, some say. I actually haven't read it yet, and that's kind of a shame on my part. Anyway, the film doesn't have a director yet, but apparently the film does have some finalists that have not been announced just yet. Now, for those guys that don't know, Zelda was, again, not only married to F. Scott Fitzgerald, she was at times his muse, as it was reported. She was also a novelist herself, even having some people think that F. Scott Fitzgerald had probably taken some of her ideas. Although that was just speculation, apparently something came out recently where there were some transcripts that supported that claim that maybe he did take some of her ideas. I don't know. Anyway, she was also an artist, but unfortunately she she was always kind of under her husband's shadow, because it's F. Scott Fitzgerald. He wrote the great American novel, The Great Gatsby. But that kind of sounded mockingly. I don't know why that sounded mock. Anyway, she was an artist, and unfortunately she had a very rocky relationship with him, and she was diagnosed with schizophrenia in the 30s, and spent the rest of her life in an institution until she died in a fire at that institution. I believe like 10 years, something like that. 10 years, she died in 1943 in a fire. Zelda Fitzgerald is someone that deserves a movie, and I can't believe it's taken so long that we haven't gotten a movie about Zelda Fitzgerald, and now we're having two, with two different actresses who are very capable of bringing her to the big screen. Everyone loves Scarlett Johansson. Everyone loves, well, not everyone, it's a broad term, but Scarlett Johansson and Jennifer Lawrence are two very capable actresses of bringing her to life. And you have Ron Howard attached to the Jennifer Lawrence one. So right now that one has the slight edge, because you got Ron Howard and you got Jennifer Lawrence. And Scarlett Johansson, if the director is as big or bigger than Ron Howard, then that project's probably going to take a bit of a leap forward. So we'll see what happens. There's no word yet on when either of these projects will start, but you already have actresses attached, you got Ron Howard attached to one, and you got maybe a director going to be announced soon for the other one. So we'll see. Peter Jackson has found his next project in Mortal Engines. Peter Jackson has finished traveling to Mordor, hopefully, at least for the time being. And he now looks to travel somewhere else in the book adaptation realm anyway. The novel in question is Philip Reeves' novel Mortal Engines, which will have Jackson produce and co-write the film with his Hobbit trilogy team, Fran Welsh and Philippa Boyens. And the hope is to, of course, create a new franchise. Now, Mortal Engines, for those not familiar, I'm not familiar with this, so this is a nice trip for both of us. It is the first book, of course, in the sci-fi fantasy series that takes place in a world thousands of years in the future, where Earth cities roam the globe on gigantic wheels in a struggle for the forever diminishing resources. The hero of the novel, Tom Nateworthy, crosses paths with a woman from the Outlands that starts their adventure. The film will be directed by visual effects supervisor turned director Christian Rivers, who actually has worked with Jackson a lot in the past. He's worked with him on Dead Alive, Heavenly Creatures, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the Hobbit films, and he also got himself an Oscar for the King Kong film. He's also worked on Pete's Dragon, although that has nothing to do with Peter Jackson, but he worked on that film as well. So this is pretty interesting. And going back to Jackson, of course, he won't be directing this film, but who knows what his next project will be. Supposedly he's working on a secret, quote-unquote, project with Steven Spielberg, over with Steven Spielberg's production company. And there's always potential sequel to Adventures of Tintin. So we'll see what happens with that. Starts filming next year in the spring in New Zealand. No release date is attached just yet. But seeing Peter Jackson's name on the big screen again, without Lord of the Rings or Hobbits or Orcs or anything like that, I think we'll get excited. We'll see. The next film in the Cloverfield universe has been called, and it is God Particle. So we've talked about God Particle on the podcast before, and even back then when we talked about it, there was some speculation that maybe it would be the next film in the Cloverfield universe, because when the project was announced, it came right after 10 Cloverfield Lane was in the box office. So the film will be produced by Bad Robot, so the speculation was that that was indeed the case. And now it looks like that is, of course, the case. The rap reports the sci-fi thriller that follows a team of astronauts that are on board a spaceship when they must race to survive when they see something that changes their reality will indeed be connected to the Cloverfield universe that Abrams, with his production company Bad Robot, and Paramount have created. However, God Particle will not be the last of the Cloverfield universe films, because apparently they are releasing a film every year set within this universe, which is rather interesting. Now, the Cloverfield universe, now we can speak more freely about it, because I think maybe enough people have seen Cloverfield. I won't ruin 10 Cloverfield Lane, but when it came out, I was talking to people that have already seen it, and it kind of felt like the Cloverfield universe was kind of turning into this Twilight Zone-esque, or for a more modern day take, a kind of a Black Mirror-esque world that would be franchise, I'd say, that all these films were taking place within the same world, or they have something attached, or not in the same world, but they have something that is attached to them that makes it take place in the same world. And if you follow the online game that's going, there's an actual term for it, I just forgot what it was. But there was when Cloverfield came out, there was like a thing online where everyone was like trying to connect some pieces, and then 10 Cloverfield Lane came out, and it kind of continued everything. Like supposedly, like the company that John Goodman works for was the same company that maybe woke up the Cloverfield monster, or it was stuff like that. Like there's this company in this universe that's just doing stuff they shouldn't be doing, and it's causing all this mayhem. So that would be the connecting tissue. So maybe the spaceship is funded by this company or something. I don't know. But the universe, it's kind of set within itself, where maybe it's just taking, maybe it's just kind of like this Twilight Zone or Black Mirror-esque world. And I think it's kind of an interesting approach that they would do that. Of course, we have to see what God Particle brings to the table. Of course, that title will probably change. But it'd be interesting to see kind of where that goes, and see if this is even worthy of an approach like that. So the film already has a pretty impressive cast. That was the last time we actually talked about the God Particle, I believe, because it's been pretty quiet on that front. Apparently they've been filming this for a while now too. David Oyelowo was in the film. He was in Selma. He played Martin Luther King. Gugu Mbatha-Raw, I think that's how you say her name. She was in Concussion and Free State of Jones. She's in the film. Daniel Breaux, who played Zemo in Captain America Civil War, she's in here. Elizabeth Debicki's in the film. Ziya Zhang from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon and Rush Hour 2. Chris O'Dowd, Askell Henny from The Martian, and John Ortiz are all in the film. That's a pretty impressive lineup for a film like this, and this is probably the best lineup they have so far, and this is only the third film. So it should be interesting to see how it is. I just hope that they kind of make it make sense, that it's, within this kind of world. And I'm interested in seeing what they do with it. And I think a Cloverfield universe should be kind of cool. So obviously I'll hold off my opinion and see what kind of happens when we start seeing footage for it. God Particle does currently have a release date for next year on February 24th. So if that's the case, I mean, they've already started filming this, so we'll see what happens. We'll see if they keep that release date. And again, this is kind of changing stuff around because 10 Cloverfield Lane kind of came out of nowhere. That originally was called Valencia, and it wasn't until like 2 months before the film came out where it's like, oh no, it's a Cloverfield. It's connected to Cloverfield, and everyone was like, what the hell? What are you talking about? And so this is kind of interesting. They've been like, no, we're just gonna tell you out front that this is connected to the Cloverfield universe, and we're gonna start releasing movies every year. That's kind of interesting. It is, and let's hope that it takes off. Again, as long as the movies are good, I don't think anyone's going to complain. 10 Cloverfield Lane was really good. It was a really good movie. The last act of the film, where they connected to the Cloverfield universe, was a little out there, but it didn't take away from everything that we saw beforehand. For me, anyway. So, alright, so let's move on. Edge of Tomorrow 2 will be a prequel. Now, Edge of Tomorrow, the action thriller Edge of Tomorrow that came out 2014, was a really surprise hit for fans and for critics. And it was directed by Doug Liman. Of course, it had Tom Cruise in the lead. It had Emily Blunt in the lead as the female lead, and it was written by Christopher McQuarrie. And it was a really huge hit. Everyone really loved it, and it was a surprise hit, really, because I don't think anyone was expecting it to be as good as it was, or to make it to be a hit on the box office as it was. So earlier this year it was announced that there would be a sequel, and that Doug Liman would come back to direct. And Doug Liman just dropped some tidbits about the sequel, that it's actually going to be a prequel, and that makes a lot of sense because if you saw the first film, it ended in a nice way. But making a sequel, I was like, when it was announced, we're like, okay, how are they going to do this? But now that he says it's going to be a prequel, it makes a lot of sense. And he talked a little bit. I mean, he didn't really go into detail too much. He said that the sequel would be a prequel, and that he would be expressing some ideas he's had for some time about it. I don't know what that means, but that's what he said. And again, he didn't go into details. So the idea of the sequel is going to be a prequel is interesting, and I think it makes probably the best sense for this. And Lyman even said that this film is going to be better than the first film. So that's a very bold statement to make, but we'll see what happens with that. The prequel idea, I think, is really smart. We don't know who's going to be in it. We don't know if Tom Cruise is going to come back. It is a prequel, so his character only gets introduced in the first film. His character really has nothing to do prequel-wise. If they're going to do a prequel, maybe they'll follow Emily Blunt's character. She has a whole history with the time loop that the first film introduces before the events of Edge of Tomorrow. So if you're going to do a prequel, maybe follow her. That would be really cool. Just having a movie led by Emily Blunt, I'd be okay with that. Just buy my ticket now. But we'll see what happens with Edge of Tomorrow 2, which is actually a prequel. And I'm sure they'll change the title. They're not going to call it Edge of Tomorrow 2. Or maybe they will. Who knows? Who knows? Shane Black talked a little bit about the Predator film that he's directing. So they're going to start filming the Predator next year. And he talked a little bit about the film, talking about the tone and the rating and what we can expect from the character. And when it comes to the rating, he said that it will be rated R, and that him and the studio, which is 20th Century Fox, agreed to. And he gave a little bit of comment saying, "I made the case, and I think they agree that fans of the Predator generally probably aren't looking to go see a PG-13 rated version of it. It would be more of a letdown if it was sort of tailored to a family-friendly audience." Audience? I said that weird the first time. Anyway, if it were allowed to play out on the same scale and level that the first rated R one did. I'm sure many fans are happy with that, are happy with hearing that it's going to be rated R. And truly, part of me thinks that the film needs to be rated R since the original was, and I think a Predator film does just suit better to a rated R rating, to be honest. When it came to the characters, he said he wants to keep some similarities to the type of characters from the first film. Keep in mind, he was in the first film. If you don't remember, or just don't know, or never saw the original Predator, which, first of all, what's wrong with you? Go watch it with Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's awesome.
Get to the chopper!
That's another movie you can add to your Halloween marathon list, The Predator. Or just Predator. This one's called The Predator. He was in the first film. Shane Black was in the first film. He had a small role in it, but he was in there. Here's what he said about the characters. He said, I think it'll be interesting to get a group of credible guys. The hallmark of the first one was to have guys together that are kind of funny and self-referential and also very tough. I don't know that we're going to deviate much more from that. There are at least a couple factors that we have deliberately chosen to make it not just a group of buff, tough guys. And again, the first film starred big, tough guys like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Carl Weathers was in there, Bill Duke, and even Justin Ventura was in there. So there's that.
I ain't got time to bleed.
And when it comes to the tone, Black made a pretty exciting answer, and one I'm sure that not many people were expecting. But now that this is out there, it's kind of interesting. Saying, I think the Predator movies have slightly veered from a typical sci-fi in that there are sort of a thriller aspect to them. I think it should be scary. I think it should be funny. I think ultimately it should be wondrous and about perceiving things that human beings very seldom get a chance to see. I don't mean movie audiences. I mean characters in the movie. I'm not saying my movie will be nothing. I'm not saying that my movie will be anything anybody's ever seen before. So he made a little cracking joke at himself. But that's interesting. It really is. I mean, obviously we see movies nowadays and we're like, characters just see a big, alien monster, and the first thing is, let's shoot at it. Instead of being like, what the hell is that? Should we run? I don't know if we should run. Is it attacking? No, let's shoot it. Stuff like that. That should be interesting to see. Finally, he does mention the original film, and the film, The Predator, will take place 30 years after the original, so it will mention the events of the first film, making it more of a sequel and not necessarily a reboot, which are kind of also his words as well. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really looking for the Predator. Just the character itself, the Predator, is just really, really badass and cool. And I've been waiting for another Predator film for a while. So, and one that's directed by Shane Black. I mean, sure, why not? Right? I mean, he has a history with it. I mean, he's a part of it, so obviously he has a connection to it because he was in the original. Right now, the only cast member officially signed on is Boyd Holbrook, who replaces Benicio del Toro after scheduling conflicts had him drop out. The Predator currently has a release date for February 9th, 2018. Speaking of things that will finally be happening, Shawn Levy is going to direct the Uncharted movie adaptation. The movie adaptation for the Uncharted video game has taken a big step forward, as its found director Shawn Levy, who has of course directed all the 90 Museum films. He also directed Real Steel. He also directed a film that I didn't think was going to be any good, but really got to me. This Is Where I Leave You. So Sony Pictures has bought in Levy to work off the script that was written by Joe Carnahan after the popular video game franchise. There's no word yet on what the film will be about, but I'm sure it will probably follow close to the video games because it is a video game adaptation. Levy's a solid choice. He's a really solid choice. He's done, despite what many people probably think about the 90 Museum films, they are what they are, and they are what they were supposed to be. They're just fun family films. Real Steel, I think, was a better movie than people expected. I think they just saw the name and they're like, nope. Or they just saw the idea. It's like, oh, it's like Rock'em Sock'em Robots, just with a bigger budget. Probably, yeah, that's probably what it was. But it was still a pretty good movie. It was a still enjoyable, fun movie. And he's produced a lot of great stuff as well. He's even directed a few episodes of Stranger Things, the big Netflix show, which I saw, and that kind of seemed like I was making fun of it. No, I love Stranger Things. Stranger Things was awesome. But he's directed a few episodes of that, and he's a producer on a lot of stuff. So he's a solid choice. And I think if Uncharted was ever going to get made, I think they just took a huge step forward with bringing in Shawn Levy. If anyone's gonna bring Uncharted to the big screen, it's probably going to be him. He's probably a really solid choice for it. So yeah. So for those of you not familiar with the Uncharted games, it follows Nathan Drake, who is he just goes around the world collecting artifacts and solving puzzles, and of course goes on some crazy adventures shooting bad guys because they want to kill him. So yeah. There's no word yet on when the film will go into production, and there's no release date. There was a release date, but Sony pulled the movie from the release date because they weren't moving forward with it. So now they have a new script. Now they have a director. Hopefully they'll find a cast soon and they'll get it out there. And what has become our last news item of the day, at the time of this recording anyway, because talked about Deadpool earlier. Indiana Jones 5. The script is currently being written, and a very surprising tidbit, going to one of the writer, or he is the writer of the film, David. I'm butcher his last name. I always find out how to pronounce his last name, and then I always mess it up. Coep, I think that's how you say it. Coep. He pretty much dropped a bombshell on a lot of people, saying that George Lucas is not involved with Indiana Jones 5, which is a really big deal. For those of you guys who don't know, George Lucas has, of course, always been attached to the Indiana Jones films. He's always the guy that comes up with the stories. He always comes up with, along with other writers, comes up with the stories, and then Steven Spielberg goes down and directs them. So this is, it's not a huge deal. It's a big deal, but it's not like a huge deal. It's like, oh my god, Indiana Jones 5 is gonna suck. No, it's not anything like that. But him not being, I'm sure they'll attach him, some way, characters created by George Lucas or whatever. But since he doesn't run Lucasfilms anymore, I guess it makes sense. But it's still one of those things where it's like, oh well, I guess it's interesting. It's to be interesting to see that this is gonna be the kind of the real first Indiana Jones film that doesn't have George Lucas's kind of mind or story behind it. I'm sure they'll ask him like behind the scenes, like, hey, what do you think about this? And they'll be like, no, I don't like that. No, don't do that. And they're like, all right, and they'll do it anyway because he doesn't officially work for them anymore. I doubt that will happen. But yeah. So Indiana Jones 5 is in the works. The writer, I'm not gonna pronounce his name anymore. He's currently writing. He said he's currently writing the script. Steven Spielberg is, of course, coming back to direct the film, and he pretty much went. And they've worked together before. Spielberg and Coep. There, I said it on films before. He's worked with Spielberg on Jurassic Park, War of the Worlds. I always say that too fast and I mess it up. And they even worked together on Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which of course was the last Indiana Jones film. And David Coep has worked on a lot of other films. He's worked on Mission Impossible, Panic Room, the first Spider-Man, and the upcoming Inferno film that we'll talk about a little bit later on. But he said Lucas wasn't attached, but him and Spielberg have gotten together and they're working on the story right now. They came up with a good idea they really like, and they're going with it, and that's what they're doing. So, so he said he's deeply immersed in writing the script at the moment. They have an idea, and they like the idea, so they're going with it. And Indiana Jones 5 will be released. It has a release date right now of July 19th, 2019. So maybe they'll start filming sometime late next year, maybe. That's probably the best time to do it, even early 2018. But we'll see what happens. So Indiana Jones 5 is there. Of course, Harrison Ford will come back to play Indiana Jones, and it should be interesting to see how this all plays out. All right, so that's all the news items that came out again at the time of this recording. So there's that. Some of the trailers that dropped this week. Of course, we do trailer talk here. The final trailer for Rules Do Not Apply, which is a film directed by Warren Beatty in a very long time. That's where he plays Howard Hughes in the film. The final trailer came out for that. The first trailer for Shia LaBeouf's post-apocalyptic PTSD-Thriller Man Down came out. The film's not really getting a lot of good reviews, but that came out. Doesn't look too bad. I mean, the trailer wasn't really that well put together, but it does show Shia LaBeouf is getting back into the drama game on that end. And apparently, this movie has been sitting on the shelf for a few years now, so that's not really always a good sign. A new trailer for M. Night Shyamalan's next film, Split, came out. I'm actually looking forward to this. I talked about this on the podcast when the first trailer came out. I am looking forward to Split. I really am. M. Night Shyamalan, he's crossed us so many times. He's fooled us so many times. This doesn't look that bad. The Visit, his last film, wasn't that bad. It wasn't. I was very skeptical about that film, and I went to go see it. It wasn't that bad. So hopefully he's kind of gone back into the game a little bit. Hopefully Split is as good or better than The Visit. And you got James McAvoy. You can't go wrong with James McAvoy. So that came out. Some new trailers out there. Also a new trailer for Ang Lee's directed film, Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk. That looks pretty good as well. That movie is going to be a bit of an experiment in a lot of cases, and you can probably see from the trailer how that's going to work out. All right, so let's get to this week's releases. we don't have a lot of movies coming out this week. This week seems pretty interesting. So we have 2 limited releases this week. They're both documentaries. One of them is on Oasis, called Oasis Supersonic. The other one is Gimme Danger, which is a documentary on the punk rock band The Stooges, also known as Iggy and the Stooges, as in Iggy Pop. So those are your limited releases this week. Your wide release this week is Inferno, which is based off the novel by Dan Brown, and once again is directed by Ron Howard. And of course, Tom Hanks is in the film, where he plays Robert Langdon, who wakes up in an Italian hospital with amnesia. He teams up with Dr. Sienna Brooks, played by Felicity Jones, and together they must race across Europe against the clock to foil a deadly global plot. The cast also includes Ben Foster, Arfan Khan, and Omar Sy. The film doesn't look... I mean, I've seen Angels and Demons, I've seen Da Vinci Code, I've read the Da Vinci Code and Angels and Demons, I have not read Inferno, and the films have been okay. I mean, Da Vinci Code was alright, Angels and Demons was always the better... Angels and Demons was the better of the 2 books, and it was also the better of the 2 movies, but that wasn't saying much movie-wise, because the Da Vinci Code was just okay, and Angels and Demons was just a better okay. And Inferno it looks okay. I mean, it's not getting the best reviews out there right now, but I mean, I've already seen the other 2. Maybe I'll just go watch this one as well. So there you go. That's your one limited release this week is Inferno, and your limited releases are documentaries of bands. So let's get this week's predictions. Didn't do picks last week because there was no picks last week. There was no podcast last week. So the box office last week was Boom, Madea Halloween, which surprised everyone, at number 1. Jack Reacher, Never Go Back at number 2. Ouija, because it's pronounced Ouija, not Ouija, as many people have been calling it. Origin of Evil was at number 3. The Encounter was number 4, and The Girl on the Train was number 5. Keeping Up with the Joneses was the other wide release last week. That came in at number 7 at the box office last week. So this week's picks for my little game here that I do that usually get wrong. Inferno was going to be number 1. I think there's enough fans out there. There's enough I almost call him Tom Cruise. There's enough Tom Hanks fans and Ron Howard fans out there in the world. So Inferno is going to be number 1. But Boom, Madea Halloween will be number 2. Jack Reacher will be number 3. Ouija, Origin of Evil will be number 4, which is a better movie than you would think. I didn't watch the first Ouija movie because it didn't look that good, and from what I hear, it wasn't very good. But Ouija, Origin of Evil is actually a really good movie. It's not that bad. It really isn't. I was surprised how good it was. And The Encounter will be number 5. All right, so my picks again, once again, without the interruption. My picks: number 1, Inferno. Number 2, Boom, Madea Halloween. Number 3, Jack Reacher, Never Go Back. Number 4, Ouija, Origin of Evil. And number 4, The Accountant. Box office, again, it's only one limited release, or one wide release. Who knows what the box office is going to do this weekend. It's a slow weekend. The World Series is going on right now. I think some of you guys know I'm from Chicago. If you're from out of state, I'm not a big baseball fan, but the Cubs are in the World Series, and that's a big deal, apparently. As you can tell, I'm not a Cubs fan. But I am rooting for them. Hopefully they get their World Series title. So anyway, this is a movie podcast. We're not talking about sports. All right, so there you go, guys. That's it. That's the podcast this week. Thank you very much for listening to the podcast this week. As always, go to my Facebook page. Give me a like over there, facebook.com/moviepit. Link will be down below in the description /show notes area. Also, while you're down there, be sure to click on my WordPress account, which is where I write all my written reviews. This week, I will have some mini reviews for you guys of the films I saw at the Chicago International Film Festival that was out this past week, and I saw a lot of great films there. Doing mini reviews on that. Also have a mini review of Ouija, Origin of Evil, of Jack Reacher, Never Go Back, and of Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, which I finally saw last week. So we have some mini reviews up there. Got some other stuff planned for the WordPress account. Link will be down below in the description /show notes area, or you can just go to movieswithchris.wordpress.com. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week. You guys are really awesome. I always end the podcast with, as always, stay safe, have a fun weekend, and go watch some movies. But since it is Halloween on Monday, I will end the podcast by this. It is Halloween. Stay safe out there, guys. Be smart. Have a fun one, but just be careful. You know, loonies like to come on Halloween. So just go out there, be careful, be safe, have a fun time, and have a very happy Halloween.